He stood completely still. His heart was beating too fast. His hands had gone cold. He had walked past this clock tower 1,000 times. Every morning. Every evening. For 20 years. And he had never once stopped to look at what was carved into the stone at the back. Until now. 2 names. His own name. Carved into stone, decades before he was born. In a town that had erased all records of its own past. Professor Leo took one slow breath. And thought. Someone knew I would come here. Someone has been waiting for me to find this. This is his story. And it starts here. Hello, and welcome. I am very glad you are here today. Whether you are sitting quietly at home, walking through a park, traveling on a train, or lying in bed with your eyes closed. Welcome. You are in exactly the right place to practice your English. Today we begin something new. Something a little mysterious. Something, perhaps, a little strange. This is episode 1 of a brand new story series. The Secret Diary of Professor Leo. And our first story is called Professor Leo and the Machine of Memories. Before we begin, let me ask you something. Have you ever found something old and forgotten? An old photograph, perhaps. A letter from someone long ago. A box hidden at the back of a cupboard. Sometimes old things carry secrets. Quiet secrets. Secrets that have been sleeping for years. And sometimes, when those secrets wake up, everything changes. Chapter 1. The Professor Who Lived Alone. At the end of a long, quiet road, in a small town most people had never heard of, there was a house that looked different from all the others. It was tall and narrow. The paint was old and slightly grey. The garden was full of unusual plants that nobody could name. And the curtains were always closed. Inside that house lived Professor Leopold Leo. Most people simply called him Professor Leo. He was 71 years old. He had white hair that went in every direction. He wore glasses with small round lenses. And he always carried a pen in his top pocket. He had no family nearby. No dog or cat. No television. Only books. Hundreds and hundreds of books, stacked from floor to ceiling in every room. People in the town thought he was strange. Not dangerous. Just different. He never says hello, the baker's wife once said. He walks too fast, said the man at the post office. He once bought 17 identical notebooks on the same day, the stationer whispered. But nobody knew the real reason why. The truth was simple. Professor Leo was always thinking. Always working. Always trying to solve a problem that nobody else even knew existed. He had been a scientist once. A real scientist. With a laboratory and colleagues and important papers published in important journals. But that was many years ago. Now he worked alone. Quietly. Secretly. And below his house, hidden behind a large bookcase in the basement, was a room that no visitor had ever seen. Chapter 2. The Locked Diary. Every evening, after a simple dinner of soup and bread, Professor Leo would sit at his desk. He would take out a small key from the chain around his neck. He would open the bottom drawer of his desk. And he would remove a very old, very worn, dark green notebook. The cover was made of thick leather. The edges were soft and dark with age. And on the front, written in careful handwriting, were 4 words. The Private Diary of L. He had been writing in this diary for 40 years. 40 years of observations. 40 years of questions. 40 years of strange and wonderful ideas that he was not yet ready to share with the world. He always wrote slowly. He always wrote carefully, as if the words themselves were fragile. On the night our story begins, Professor Leo sat down at his desk a little later than usual. It was almost midnight. Outside, the town was very quiet. Not even the wind was moving. He unlocked the diary, turned to a fresh page, picked up his pen, and began to write. Tonight, he wrote, I believe the machine is finally ready. 22 years of work. 1,407 experiments. And perhaps, at last, I am close to an answer. The question, as always, remains the same. Can a forgotten memory be brought back? Not imagined. Not constructed. But truly returned, like something real, something that was always there, simply waiting to be found. He paused, tapped his pen against his chin, then continued writing. If the machine works tonight, everything I have believed about this town may be proven true, or everything I have feared may become real. Either way, tomorrow, nothing will be the same. He closed the diary, locked it carefully, placed the key back around his neck. Then he stood up, picked up his cup of cold tea, and walked slowly towards the bookcase. Chapter 3. The Machine in the Basement. Behind the bookcase was a narrow door. The door was painted the same color as the wall, so a visitor would never notice it. Professor Leo pushed the bookcase slightly to the left, turned the handle, and stepped through into darkness. He did not need a light to find his way. He had walked this path 10,000 times. Down 12 stone steps. Left at the bottom. Along a short corridor that smelled of old metal and something faintly chemical. Then, finally, into the laboratory. He pressed a switch. Yellow light filled the room slowly, like something waking up. The laboratory was extraordinary. Not beautiful in the way a museum is beautiful, but extraordinary in the way that only a truly passionate person's workspace can be. Every surface was covered. Notebooks, wires, glass tubes, small motors, printed diagrams, tiny components, jars of things best left unnamed, and at least 4 different clocks, none of which showed the same time. And in the center of the room, on a large wooden table, sat the machine. It was not large. Not the sort of machine you see in science fiction films, with flashing lights and dramatic sounds. It was, in fact, rather modest. About the size of a small suitcase. Made of copper and dark wood. With a single glass dome on the top and several dials along the front. In the middle was a round metal plate, just large enough to place both hands upon. Professor Leo had built it piece by piece, year by year, test by test. It had exploded once, caught fire twice, and refused to work for an entire period of 3 years, which Professor Leo had referred to as, simply, the difficult phase. But now, he believed, it was ready. He walked to the machine, stood before it, and looked at it the way a painter looks at a finished canvas. With uncertainty, with hope, and with just a small amount of fear. Right then, he said softly, to nobody in particular, "Let us see." Chapter 4. A strange memory returns. Professor Leo placed his hand on the metal plate. He closed his eyes. He took a long, slow breath. The machine made a quiet sound, like a low hum, like the sound of something old waking up from a very long sleep. Nothing happened. For a full minute, nothing happened at all. Professor Leo kept his eyes closed. His breathing remained slow. His hands stayed perfectly still. Then something changed. It was not dramatic. Not a flash of light or a sudden sound. It was quieter than that. More personal. Like a door somewhere inside his mind opening, just slightly. Just enough to let something through. A memory. Not a memory he had forgotten. A memory he had never known he had. He was very young in the memory. 5, perhaps. Maybe 6. He was standing in this very same street, outside this very same house. But the house looked different. Brighter. Newer. The garden was full of roses, not the strange unnamed plants that grew there now. And there was a woman standing at the gate. She was young. Dark hair. A long blue coat. She was looking at him. Not smiling. Not frowning. Just watching. Her expression was difficult to understand. Something between sadness and recognition. As though she knew something he did not. And then she was gone. Professor Leo opened his eyes. He was breathing faster. His hands were trembling slightly. He lifted them from the metal plate and looked at them as if they belonged to someone else. "Interesting," he whispered. He sat down on a small stool. Wrote several notes quickly in his diary. Then he looked up at the machine. Who was she? The machine, of course, did not answer. But something in the room felt different now. Something felt awake. Chapter 5. The town with no past. The following morning, Professor Leo did something he had not done in a very long time. He left the house before 9 o'clock. He walked to the town center. And he went to the local library. The librarian, a young woman named Clara, looked up in surprise. Professor Leo rarely came in. When he did, he never made small talk. "I need the town records," he said quietly. "Old ones. From the 1950s, if you have them." Clara blinked. "I can check," she said carefully. She returned 15 minutes later with a slightly apologetic expression. "I'm sorry," she said. "The records from before 1970 are missing." Professor Leo frowned. "Missing?" "Yes. It's quite strange, actually. Everything from that period is just gone." "Were they damaged?" "Lost in a fire." Clara hesitated. "Nobody knows. It was like that when I started working here. And my predecessor said the same thing." She paused. "It's not just the library, either. The town hall lost those records too." She lowered her voice. "And the church registry." She looked at him with curious eyes. "All from the same period. All just gone." Professor Leo said nothing for a moment. He thanked her quietly and walked back out into the street. He stood on the pavement and looked up at the town around him. At the old buildings. The familiar clock tower in the square. The narrow streets he had walked for years. He had always thought this was an ordinary town. A quiet town. A town with nothing to hide. But now, for the first time, he wondered. Chapter 6. The girl in the photograph. That afternoon, Professor Leo returned to his laboratory. He sat at the machine again, placed his hands on the plate, closed his eyes, and waited. This time, the memory came faster. The same street. The same gate. But now he saw more. The woman in the blue coat was not alone. She was standing beside a small girl. The girl had dark eyes and a serious expression. She was holding something. A book. A small, green book. And on the cover, even in the memory, Professor Leo could see a name. Not clearly. But, almost. He opened his eyes. He wrote everything down. Then he went upstairs to the highest shelf in his study and began pulling down boxes. Old boxes. Dusty boxes. Boxes he had not opened in 30 years. For 2 hours he searched. Through old letters. Old receipts. Old documents from the years after he first moved to the house. And then, at the bottom of the final box, he found it. A photograph. Black and white. Slightly faded. But unmistakable. It showed a woman standing outside his house. A woman in a long dark coat. Behind her, the gate. Behind the gate, the garden full of roses. He turned the photograph over. On the back, written in faded pencil, were 3 words. Eleanor. Spring. 1958. Professor Leo sat very still for a long time. He had never heard the name Eleanor in connection with this house. Never. Not once in all the years he had lived here. He placed the photograph on his desk, directly in front of him. And he looked at the woman's face for a very long time. "Who are you?" he said quietly. "And what are you trying to tell me?" Chapter 7. The Secret Under the Clock Tower. The next morning, Professor Leo walked to the oldest part of the town. Past the market. past the old post office, past the narrow alley that smelled of bread, until he reached the clock tower in the center of the square. The clock tower was the oldest building in town. It had stood for over 200 years. Most people passed it every day without really looking at it. It was simply there. Like the sky, or the road, or the cold morning air. But Professor Leo had been thinking about something Clara had said. All the records from before 1970. Gone. Not just from the library. Not just from the town hall. But from the church registry too. Someone had not simply lost those records. Someone had removed them. He circled the clock tower slowly, looking at the old stone, the carved dates along the base. And then he stopped. Near the back of the tower, where almost no one ever looked, was a small carved panel in the stone. He had walked past it for years without noticing. But now, looking closely, he could see it was not merely decorative. It was a list of names, carved very finely, very carefully, as though someone had worked in secret, quickly, by low light. Most of the names were unreadable now, worn away by decades of rain and wind. But near the bottom, still clear, were two names he could read. The first name made him pause, because it was a name he recognized. The second name made him step back entirely, because the second name was his own. Leopold Leo. He stood in the cold square and said nothing. Behind him, people walked to work. A bus passed. Two children ran by, laughing. The town continued, as always. But something in Professor Leo's world had changed completely. Chapter 8. The night of the experiment. That night, Professor Leo did not eat dinner. He did not make tea. He did not read. He went straight to the laboratory. He sat before the machine for a long time before touching it. He was thinking, organizing, preparing himself for whatever came next. Because he understood now that this was not a simple experiment anymore. This was personal. He placed his hands on the plate, closed his eyes. And this time, something different happened. The machine did not hum quietly. It hummed loudly. The glass dome on top began to glow. Not brightly, but steadily. A warm amber light, like a very old lamp. The dials moved. The temperature in the room seemed to drop slightly. And then, the memories came. Not one memory. Many. All at once. All rushing in like water through a broken wall. He was a baby in this house. He saw the woman in the blue coat. He saw the girl with the green book. He saw his own hands, very small, reaching up toward someone. He heard a voice. A woman's voice. Warm and familiar. Saying his name. And then he saw something that made everything stop. He saw a meeting. A secret meeting. The clock tower. A group of people gathered in darkness. Serious faces. Worried faces. And documents being passed around. And signatures being made. and a decision being agreed upon. A decision that would change the town forever. A decision to remove all records, all history, all evidence that certain people had ever lived there at all. And at the center of the meeting, holding the documents, was a face he now recognized. A face he had seen before. The face from the photograph. Eleanor. Only now she did not look afraid. She looked angry. She was not agreeing with the others. She was arguing against them. She was the only person in the room who was refusing to sign. And then the memory went dark. Professor Leo lifted his hands from the machine. He was breathing hard. His eyes were wet. He did not know exactly what had happened. But he knew enough. Eleanor had tried to stop something. Something that involved this house. This town. And his own name carved in stone. Chapter 9. The truth comes back. For 3 days, Professor Leo worked without stopping. He barely slept. He barely ate. He filled page after page of his diary with notes, diagrams, and questions. He used the machine many more times. Each session brought new pieces. Like a puzzle assembling itself very slowly, in the dark. He now knew the following things. He had been born in this town. Not somewhere else, as he had always believed. Here. In this house. In the room that was now his study. He knew that Eleanor was his mother. A scientist herself. A brilliant one, from what he could tell. Someone who had worked on something that frightened the people in power. Something they did not want the world to know about. He knew that a decision had been made to remove her from the official records. To erase any evidence that she had lived in this town. To erase her work. To erase, as far as possible, her name. And he knew that she had fought against it. And that she had lost. What he did not yet know was why. What had she discovered? What had been so dangerous? What had frightened them so much that an entire town's past had to be removed? On the 4th morning, he finally found the answer. Not in a memory, but in the diary itself. He had been reading back through his oldest entries. Pages written in a younger hand. Notes from his first years as a scientist, before he fully understood why he had always been drawn to the study of memory. And near the very back, behind the last page he had ever written on, he found something he had never noticed before. A folded piece of paper. Very thin. Very old. Pressed into the spine of the notebook so carefully it had become almost invisible. He unfolded it with trembling fingers. It was a letter. Short. Written in a handwriting he did not recognize. But the signature at the bottom made him go perfectly still. Eleanor Leo. Your mother. Who loved you very much. And who is sorry she could not stay. He read the letter slowly. Then again. Then one more time. By the end, he was sitting on the floor of his laboratory, with his back against the old wooden table, the letter held carefully in both hands. He understood everything now. Chapter 10. The choice of Professor Leo. For 2 days after that, Professor Leo sat quietly in his house. He did not use the machine. He did not go to the library. He did not walk to the clock tower. He simply sat a day. He made tea. He read old pages in his diary. He looked out of the window at the small, familiar town. He thought about what Eleanor had tried to do. About the people who had stopped her. About all the names removed from records. About all the history quietly erased. And he thought about what he now had. The machine. The memories. The letter. The photograph. The name carved in stone. Evidence. Real evidence. And he thought about a question. A question that had no easy answer. Should he tell people the truth? If he did, the town's past would be reopened. Families would ask questions. People would be hurt. Perhaps nothing could be fixed. Perhaps too much time had passed. Perhaps the truth, after so many years, would only cause more pain. Or perhaps the truth was simply the truth, and it belonged to the people it had been taken from. On the third morning, Professor Leo got up at 7 o'clock. He washed his face. He made strong tea. He sat at his desk. He took out the diary, turned to a fresh page, picked up his pen, and he began to write. Not in his usual careful, private way. This time he wrote clearly. Completely. The whole story. Everything he knew. Every memory the machine had returned. Every piece of evidence. Every name. He wrote for 4 hours without stopping. When he finished, he put down his pen. He looked at what he had written. Then he made a decision. He would share it. Not with one person. With everyone. Because Eleanor had tried to tell the truth once. And she had been silenced. And she had placed a letter in her son's diary and hoped that one day, when the time was right, someone would find it. That someone was him. And the time, he decided, was now. He stood up, straightened his jacket, took the pen from his top pocket, and walked to the front door. Outside, the town was quiet and bright. The same narrow streets. The same familiar clock tower. The same people walking to work. He took a long, slow breath. Then Professor Leopold Leo, the quiet old scientist who no one had really noticed for 20 years, walked out into the morning. And began. That is the end of episode 1 of The Secret Diary of Professor Leo. Thank you so much for listening today. I really hope you enjoyed this story. It was a little mysterious, a little emotional, and perhaps a little surprising. Before you go, here are 2 questions to think about. If you discovered a hidden truth about your own town or family, would you tell people? And do you think some secrets are better left alone? Perhaps think about that over a cup of tea today. Or leave a comment and tell me what you think. In our next episode, we will find out what happens when Professor Leo begins to share what he knows. Not everyone in the town will be happy. And the machine still has more memories to reveal. Until next time, thank you for learning English with me today. Keep listening. Keep learning. And as we say in Britain, cheers, and speak soon.